Hi, this is BBC News. I'm Victoria Derbyshire. Here are the headlines this Wednesday morning. The Home Secretary sets out new rules for asylum seekers who come to the UK.
We will create safe and legal routes to enable people to come to the United Kingdom in a safe way so that they can also be resettled in the United Kingdom.
Boris Johnson tells Conservative MPs the UK's vaccination programme's success is because of capitalism and greed, but instantly withdraws his comments. Questions remain over whether foreign travel from the UK will be allowed this summer as Europe faces a third wave of COVID infections. We will ask a Sage advisor for their view. What are your plans? Have you already booked a holiday for the summer abroad, or do you think we should just stay in the UK? Let me know this morning. You can email victoria@bbc.co.uk or message me on Instagram or Twitter. Police in Bristol arrest 14 people during a second night of protests against the government's police and crime bill. Prince Harry has a new job as Chief Impact Officer at a California-based company that offers coaching and counselling. And stuck in the Suez Canal, right across it in fact, a massive container ship runs aground, blocking one of the world's busiest shipping routes. Hi, good morning. The Home Secretary has announced plans for what she says are the biggest changes to the UK's asylum system in decades. They include new rules which will make it harder for anyone arriving in the UK illegally to stay. An asylum seeker is someone who's left their own country in order to seek protection from persecution. They haven't yet been legally recognised as a refugee and are waiting to receive a decision on their asylum claim. Under the government's proposed changes, anyone applying to come to the UK through official international schemes will find it easier to stay than those who come in illegally, on boats across the Channel, for example. Priti Patel says the new rules are undeniably fair and work to combat people smuggling. But refugee groups call the proposals unjust and unreal. Our Home Affairs correspondent June Kelly has this.
This is what the government is trying to stop. Migrants who've paid thousands of pounds to traffickers for the final perilous leg of their journey to the UK. Last year, 8,500 people arrived here by crossing the Channel in small boats. The majority of them are said to have claimed asylum. The Home Secretary believes those who come here in this way are rewarded, while others she describes as some of the most vulnerable never make it to Britain. Under what's called the new plan for immigration, the Home Secretary says that if people arrive illegally, it will be harder for them to stay. Those that are allowed to stay will have fewer family reunion rights and limited access to benefits. And they will be regularly reassessed for removal from the UK.
She's closing off pretty much every door that people might use in order to flee persecution and rebuild their life safely. It's not what the Refugee Convention really requires. It's not what the British public would, I think, see as a fair system.
The 10th anniversary of the start of the Syrian conflict has refocused attention on the conditions people there are enduring and trying to escape. The UK government says under a resettlement programme, it's given a home to 20,000 people from this region. In future, anyone from Syria who tries to come here using the Channel route will not be made welcome. June Kelly, BBC News.
Let's talk to our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming, who is at Westminster. I heard Priti Patel on the radio this morning say that the asylum system in this country is broken. Does she acknowledge the Conservatives have been in power for 11 years?
Not necessarily, and she would argue that the asylum system's been broken for a lot longer than 10 years, and these are problems that have just built up and built up and built up. And the fact that this has been in the headlines for about 20 years now just shows you that if there were easy solutions to this, then they would have been done by now. And there have been quite a few criticisms aimed at Priti Patel's proposals today. You heard from campaigners and groups representing refugees that this could lead to the risk of people who genuinely are fleeing persecution not not being allowed into the asylum system just because of the method they used to arrive in the UK, whether it's a dinghy over the channel or not. And then Labour are making the point, not that this is inhumane, but just that these reforms could be ineffective. They say the problem is bureaucratic. It's that the Home Office and the rest of the asylum system just isn't processing cases fast enough, and that the government is looking in the wrong place. But Priti Patel defended it all, saying it doesn't contravene international law or the 1951 Refugee Convention signed at the UN or the European Convention on Human Rights. And she also says this is the moral thing to do because it's about driving down the incentives for people to use people smugglers. Here's what she said.
An end-to-end reform that will basically now look at how we can create safe and legal routes to protect people who are fleeing persecution and stop them from being put in the hands of people smugglers and criminal facilitators, which we are seeing on a daily basis with people being smuggled into the United Kingdom, taking perilous journeys and dangerous journeys that are putting people's lives at risk. That is what we want to stop by changing the system.
Whatever happens, it will not be quick, because this now starts a 6-week period of consultation. Then in the early summer, there'll be some legislation, a huge piece of legislation, which will face quite a battle in the House of Commons, and then an even bigger one in the House of Lords. Then I imagine it will get challenged legally once it's out in the real world and affecting people. And another big part of this is the UK negotiating with other countries to make it easier to send back people. And as the EU discovered when they tried this a few years ago, that is quite tricky.
Tell us, Adam, about the Prime Minister's comments in a private Zoom meeting with Conservative MPs about the vaccination programme and why he immediately withdrew them.
Wow. So this was a meeting of Tory backbenchers just before they head off on their Easter holidays. And the Prime Minister was talking about the vaccine programme. And he said that we've got to thank commercial firms for developing the vaccines. And the reason they developed them was because they spotted the opportunity to make a profit in future. And that's because it's based on capitalist principles, which effectively is based on greed. Now, he realised quite quickly, I think, that those comments could be misinterpreted, or they might potentially be in bad taste, or they might actually not be true, because AstraZeneca is producing the vaccine at cost, not at profit. And so he straight away said to his colleagues, imagine I didn't say that, delete it from your memories. And this morning, government officials have been at great pains to stress he was not talking about the UK's vaccine programme overall. He wasn't talking about the UK's vaccine programme vis-a-vis the EU's vaccine programme. The Prime Minister, they say, was simply talking about the incentives at work in commercial firms when they innovate, and that the UK is benefiting from the innovations of private firms. But all of that added up together just makes you realise how sensitive all this stuff is when the UK and the EU are trying to diffuse a potentially very large row about the export of vaccines.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. By the way, we are going to talk to an asylum seeker living in a house in Bury in Greater Manchester in about half an hour or so. She came here from Kenya fleeing persecution 3 years ago. She is still waiting for her asylum claim to be dealt with. Now, the third wave of coronavirus sweeping across Europe means it's still too early to be planning holidays abroad. The Prime Minister and his chief medical advisor warned yesterday. The advice came as the UK marked the anniversary of the first lockdown with lights and candles for the 126,000 lives lost. John Donnison reports.
From Belfast to Blackpool, Falkirk to Cardiff. From countless homes around the UK to perhaps its most famous one. The United Kingdom lit up to remember the more than 126,000 people who've lost their lives here to COVID-19. And a warning from the government's chief medical advisor for England that while UK cases have fallen sharply, the virus is here to stay.
I regret to say that I think the chances of eradicating this disease, which means getting rid of it absolutely everywhere, are as close to zero as makes no difference. We've only achieved eradication of one disease, which is smallpox, with a phenomenally effective vaccine over a very long period of time. But I think if you talk to anybody who looks at this really seriously, who understands how infectious diseases work, I don't think there's anybody who thinks eliminating from the UK or eradicating globally for any long period of time is a realistic prospect at this point in time.
And while more than 28 million people in the UK have now received a first vaccine dose, progress is much slower in most European countries, many of which are now suffering a third wave of the virus. That's why people hoping for a long-awaited foreign holiday might be disappointed. Most overseas travel is banned until at least mid-May. The government now says it will make an announcement on trips abroad from England on April the 5th, a week earlier than expected. But the Prime Minister says summer holidays this year still look difficult. John Donnison, BBC News.
Professor Neil Ferguson is the epidemiologist whose predictions prompted the UK to go into its first lockdown a year. He explained when he thought we might be able to get back to some kind of normality.
I've always said it's not going to be an event, it's going to be a process, a gradual getting back to normality. I think I'm optimistic we'll be able to start seeing each other again in the next month, which is within the roadmap plan. And, I'm personally looking forward to a haircut, which will be a nice sign of normality. And it will be a gradual process. Depending what happens in other areas of the world, travel may be one of the later things to be relaxed. But I think we will, whilst not everything will be back to normal, by the summer, certainly by the autumn, it will feel a lot more normal.
Let's talk to Professor Mark Woolhouse, Professor of Infectious Diseases Epidemiology at the University of Edinburgh. He also advises both the Scottish and UK governments. Hello, Professor Woolhouse. Are you certain that the UK will also experience a third wave?
It's not absolutely inevitable. There's a whole range of scenarios for what could happen over the next few months. But the best case scenario is that the vaccine rollout continues to be as effective and impressive as it is now. And actually, any rise in cases doesn't translate into an enormous public health burden on hospitals or the NHS more generally. So there are optimistic scenarios and there are pessimistic scenarios, and the government has to weigh between the two.
Right, but you think the vaccination programme could potentially restrict the effects of a third wave, even if we do have some increase in infection?
Well, very much so. Certainly a first wave of the known variants. The wave going on in Europe at the moment is mostly driven by a variant that originated, as best we know, in the UK. So if that one was to wash back up on our shores, that would really be our own fault. We've already had that wave. The concern that the government's had in mind for many months now is the possibility of new variants that are somewhat better at evading the protection that the vaccine affords us, and they do want to guard against that.
In your view, should under 18s be vaccinated?
Not my view that counts. The view that counts is the Joint Committee for Vaccination Immunisation, and they will look at the results of the clinical trials that are going on in under 18-year-olds to see if the vaccine is safe and effective in that age group. If it is, then, and I'm sure it will be, but if that's all confirmed, it needs to be confirmed first, then we have to consider whether we need to vaccinate children in order to reach the herd immunity threshold. That's our best chance of keeping the numbers of cases low of this disease in the long term.
And we are going to talk actually to a member of the JCVI in half an hour or so. Holidays, I feel duty-bound to ask you what your view is on whether they will be able to go abroad this summer or not, although no one actually knows. But do you have a view on whether it's likely or unlikely?
So I don't think the scientists should be telling people whether or not they should go on holiday. Our job is to advise government on what the epidemiological situation is and what the risks are of various courses of action. Do nothing clearly is not an option. We do need to take some precautions to protect ourselves from viruses introduced from overseas. The question really is, do the measures that were in place a few months ago, were in place last summer, would they be enough? Well, it doesn't look that way because we did get the introduction of variants from Europe over last summer. So it looks like we need to take extra precautions. So I think the question is, can travel be made safe by some combination of testing and self-isolation, or is that not enough? And therefore, we have to extend the current very serious restrictions we have on travel.
Do you have a thought as to which it will be?
I think there's still time to do a little bit more work on this. There's been a tremendous amount of interest in what kind of testing and self-isolation regime would give you as much guarantee as possible that infections would not be brought in. So I wouldn't completely rule out some travel to some locations yet, if the government was willing to put the investment into establishing whether or not we can make travel safe.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you, Professor Mark Woolhouse from the University of Edinburgh. He advises both the Scottish and UK governments. 14 people have been arrested following another night of protests in Bristol. The crowds had gathered to demonstrate against the government's new policing bill. On Sunday night, more than 20 police officers were injured during demonstrations which turned violent. Andrew Plant has more.
For the second time in 3 days, riot police in the centre of Bristol, moving in to disperse protesters who had gathered near the centre of the city. It was a peaceful protest, but scuffles broke out as officers moved in. Avon and Somerset Police said current lockdown rules meant they had to disperse the group. It's now after midnight here, and we've been in this situation here in Bristol for more than an hour and a half now. You can see maybe up to 100 protesters sitting and standing there, and this line of riot police. They haven't moved for quite a long time, and the reason they're standing here is it prevents the protesters going back from here to where they started, in the city centre. It comes after these violent scenes on Sunday. 21 officers were injured when demonstrators gathered for the Kill the Bill protest against the proposed new police and crime bill. Mounted police officer Hannah Clark was working on Sunday night with her horse Mendip.
Certainly Sunday was on another level from our point of view. I've not seen levels of violence that bad in my career, and I think probably people that have been working in the job for a lot longer than me would agree with that. Certainly en route you could hear what was going on, you could hear the noise on the radio and the emergency buttons going off and colleagues asking for help. So it was quite distressing listening. As you're on your way, you just wanted to get there to kind of help, really. The aggression towards the police was astonishing, really. A lot of the windows had been damaged, there were vehicles on fire, there were hundreds of people on top of the NCP car parks, throwing items varying from street furniture, glass bottles. I think even a microwave got thrown down at one point. So it was certainly aggressive.
How the police handle protests has been in the headlines since criticism of the Metropolitan Police's handling of a vigil for Sarah Everard. With protests legally allowed once again in England from Monday, ministers will be thinking hard about how protests can be policed during a global pandemic. Andrew Plant, BBC News in Bristol.
And this is what the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, had to say about last night's scenes in Bristol.
Well, I think, first of all, look, we live in an open society and a democracy, so the principle to protest and have your voice heard is absolutely crucial. But there is no acceptability at all for criminality, thuggish behaviour, and the type of violent scenes that we have seen over recent evenings, including the most appalling assaults and criminal attacks on police officers. There's a fundamental difference between the two.
Efforts are being made to refloat a massive container ship which is completely blocking Egypt's Suez Canal. It's one of the world's most important shipping routes. It's 400 metres long. It's called the Ever Given, and it got stuck yesterday after losing power. Now, the canal through Egypt is a vital link for freight between Asia and Europe, and 50 ships a day normally pass through it, carrying 12% of the world's trade. It's not called Ever Given, it's called Evergreen, of course. We're going to talk more about how it's completely blocking that route a little later on this morning. The UK's inflation rate unexpectedly fell to 0.4% in February, down from 0.7% in January. The drop was largely due to a fall in the cost of clothes, travel and second-hand cars, although the cost of petrol and diesel has risen. February is traditionally a month where clothing prices would rise, but the Office for National Statistics said lockdown had disrupted seasonal patterns. The Prime Minister is being urged to act on loneliness with a commitment to help people to reconnect as coronavirus restrictions are eased over the coming months. A survey by the British Red Cross suggests almost 40% of adults believe they will still feel lonely once the pandemic is over. Let's talk to two people. Sumaya Osman, who's a 21-year-old student who is now living at home with her parents in Birmingham. And Raggy El Kumus is 72 and lives alone in Cornwall. Hello, both of you. Thank you very much for talking to us. Let me ask you first, Samaya, how has this year been for you in trying to keep in touch with friends?
Oh, I think it was definitely a lot more difficult this year. I think at the start, the first lockdown was a little bit easier. I think everyone thought things will be over by summer, so there was still this like momentum to try and like get through it. But towards heading into like the second/third even lockdown, I think people just kind of have got into bad habits. It's kind of difficult now to kind of reconnect with people and have that kind of still keep that energy up.
Yeah. And Raggy, let me ask you, living alone, what it's been like for you?
It is not easy. When I lost my wife to cancer 17 years ago, I learned to be single again, and COVID came and made it much worse. And the Red Cross really put me through a Zooming group, just to put voice to the face to the voice. People talk to me. Nobody talked to anybody anymore. So that was a lifeline thrown to me in the middle of an ocean of loneliness and despair, if you like.
Yes.
As for the last 17 years, I know it sounds like a cliche, I was living in the margin of existence, if you like. But thanks to Red Cross, they get me out of it once a week and recharge the batteries and carry on.
So even before COVID, you felt like you were living on the margins of existence, as you put it?
Yes, absolutely. Because I'm on my own in a small little town, and you know the people, the culture kind of thing, everyone in private kind of environment. I am in my own place, not knowing anybody because I was new here when I lost my wife. So I kind of suffered. It is being alone, single again, try to learn how to live on my own. And loneliness, when they kicked in, it just make it much more difficult. Loneliness is a bad thing. You cannot deal with it nicely. So it is difficult. It is difficult. Yes.
Samaya, sorry, I was just going to go back to Samaya, Raggy, for a moment. I know you've been at home with your parents since Christmas, studying at home. Mm-hmm. So you haven't been alone. Has it been better for you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think when I was in my accommodation, it was kind of scary. You kind of felt like if something was to happen to you, would anybody kind of notice? You were kind of locked in your accommodations. I think being at home and knowing that, like, if I don't leave my room for a day or two, someone's going to, like, knock on my door or open the door. That's really important, I think. So it's been beneficial in that sense, for sure.
I think I'm right in saying that you have experienced something called social anxiety in the past. Just explain to people what that is and how that affects you when you're thinking about going out when restrictions ease to meet people again.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an odd dynamic because I'm quite extroverted, but I suffer from social anxiety, which means I kind of put myself in situations a lot of the time where you are kind of overthinking, you kind of want to preempt people's reactions. It's a lot of feeling as if, am I upsetting people by making certain comments? And so I think add that post-COVID, I think it's going to be a very difficult space to navigate because now you've got a whole set of different boundaries and different considerations to think about. Do I go in for a hug? Do I not go in for a hug? What are the new social norms? I think that's definitely something you're going to have to take into consideration. And I think often I'm a bit worried if it's easier to then stay at home than try and navigate these spaces. And I think as it looks right now, it kind of feels a bit easier. You've got into a kind of like, it's kind of been habitual. You kind of stay at home, do everything at home. It might be an easier kind of like alternative to just stay at home, and that's obviously not great.
It might be easier, but your world becomes smaller, doesn't it? And you don't want that. I mean, you're 21. You've got your whole life ahead of you. You've got the world at your feet.
Yeah, I think that's what kind of is really upsetting for a lot of students. I think when you're young, you kind of are sold university as this kind of opportunity to it's just filled with a lot of excitement and optimism. But the reality is, for a lot of young, like turning 20s, young 20s, it's now a lot of disappointment and hopelessness. You just kind of don't know. This is meant to be your kind of period of time to be explorative and kind of find yourself, and you kind of feel a little bit robbed of that opportunity. So it's going to be hard to try and get your feet back on the right tracks again.
I understand that, but I wonder, when you reach Raggy's age, for example, 72, you might look back on this period of time and actually it will just be a blip across the period of your life. Raggy, let me ask you, what is it that you're looking forward most to when restrictions ease?
Well, it might sound funny, like a joke. I miss my fish and chips. I want to go and be able to eat out somewhere. I wanted to be able to go to my social club and see the people again.
Yeah.
I want to live again. I'm not living. I feel like I'm not living anymore. So just to get out and do the normal thing I used to do before.
That makes total sense. It doesn't sound funny or odd at all. There's people across the country listening to you, Raggy, thinking, yeah, I want to see my mates. I want to go and get some fish and chips or eat in the pub or whatever.
Yeah, well, I don't drink, so I'll have or a salt beef in the little pub with an orange juice or something. I love that.
Yes.
But it is just nowhere to go, and because I have a heart failure condition, my movement is a bit limited. And please, you're talking to the young lady there, please don't get old, for God's sake. It is a drag.
Okay, I actually want to get old. But anyway, I understand. Raggy, thank you very much for talking to us.
No, you're welcome.
We appreciate it. Raggy Al-Kumas, who is in Cornwall. He lives alone. He's looking forward to meeting everybody when restrictions ease. And Sumaya Osman, thank you very much for speaking to us and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
An individual has died in the floods that have hit eastern Australia. Officials have confirmed the fatality but haven't yet released any further details. Local reports suggest a man's body was pulled from a car in the town of Glenorrey, near some of the worst affected areas. The American actor George Segal has died from complications after heart surgery. He was 87. He was best known for the TV series The Goldbergs and was nominated for an Oscar for his role in the 1966 film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, for which he was nominated for an Oscar, and A Touch of Class in 1973, which won him a Golden Globe. Prince Harry's got a new job at a professional coaching firm in San Francisco. He's become the Chief Impact Officer at a California-based company called Better Up, where he says he'll be fostering honest and vulnerable conversations about mental health. Mark Lebel has more.
Months into the role, Prince Harry is said to be focusing on changing the global dialogue on mental health. So what does his new boss think of him?
I had obviously never talked to royalty before in my life. And I think the most impressive thing has just been his focus singularly on how can he be of service, how can he advance his vision. So I have a feeling that he'll work out.
What do you call him?
We're partners here. He likes to be called Harry in the workplace, so we just address him as Harry.
But one skeptic describes Better Up's new Chief Impact Officer as a made-up name, solely designed to bring PR sizzle to the San Francisco tech startup.
This is a company that does coaching for managers mainly, right? And it's mainly business coaching and career coaching. And I don't really think that British royalty is particularly well suited for that, to be honest. I don't think those experiences translate very well.
So how will Harry's new firm go about judging the sixth in line to the throne's progress?
Yes, well, lots can be said on the, as we call in the US, the Modern Performance Review. We have a really open relationship and constant feedback and communication, so I think we won't have any trouble there.
The private company is, however, keeping his hours and pay, perhaps understandably, strictly confidential. Mark Lobel, BBC News.
The Queen's granddaughter, Zara Tindall, has given birth to her third baby, a boy. They've called him Lucas Philip Tyndall. It's the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh's 10th great-grandchild. Zara's husband Mike revealed the news this morning via his podcast.
And then that anger just dissipated in 4.5 minutes of beautiful French joy. And then Sunday got even better because a little baby boy arrived at my house. You're kidding!
Congratulations to them. In the next half hour, we're going to talk to a member of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation and ask him when under 18s in this country are going to be getting vaccinated, or if they are going to be getting vaccinated. Before that, let's bring you a look at the weather. Here's Carol.
Hello again. Over the next few days, the forecast is essentially sunshine and showers, but turning much colder on Friday. So some of those showers, mostly in the hills, will be wintry. Today, we've got a band of cloud and light patchy rain pushing down towards the southeast. Showers across Northern Ireland and also Scotland turning heavier through the course of the day with the wind strengthening. But in between, there will be a fair bit of sunshine with top temperatures 13 degrees. We say goodbye to this cloud in the southeast overnight, but we do have showers coming in across England and Wales, pushing south, and then more showers coming in across Scotland and Northern Ireland. And it's going to be a cold night, particularly in rural areas where temperatures will be lower than this, and indeed there could well be some pockets of frost to watch out for. So tomorrow we say goodbye to our front pushing away to the southeast, taking its cloud, spots of rain with it, and then it really is a mixture of sunshine and showers, with most of the showers being in the north and the west. In the sunshine, temperatures up to about 13 degrees and lighter winds.
Hello, this is BBC News. I'm Victoria Derbyshire. Here are the headlines. The Home Secretary sets out new rules for asylum seekers who come to the UK.
We will create safe and legal routes to enable people to come to the United Kingdom in a safe way so that they can also be resettled in the United Kingdom.
Boris Johnson tells Conservative MPs the UK's vaccination programme success is because of capitalism and greed, but instantly withdraws his comments. Questions remain over whether foreign travel from the UK will be allowed this summer, as Europe faces a third wave of COVID infections. Police in Bristol arrest 14 people during a second night of protests against the government's police and crime bill. And stuck in the Suez Canal, a massive container ship runs aground, blocking one of the world's busiest shipping routes. Time for the sport now, and John is in Salford. Morning.
Morning, Victoria. Many thanks. We'll begin with football because Wales begin their World Cup qualifying campaign later as they face the world's number one ranked side in the shape of Belgium. Captain Gareth Bale says reaching the tournament in Qatar would mean he's achieved everything he wanted to in football. It will be tricky, though, with only the top team qualifying automatically from the group. Wales, worth pointing out, do have a good recent record against the Belgians, but they haven't made it to a World Cup since 1958, and Bale says he's determined to change that.
Coming into my Wales career, the main thing was to play in a major tournament. Obviously, we managed to do that, and now, obviously, I think to tick everything off the list would to be qualified for a World Cup. So, like I said, we want to do that. We don't want to just qualify for one or two tournaments. We want to keep qualifying and making sure we're pushing Wales in the right direction. And yeah, for me personally now, yeah, to qualify for a World Cup would be amazing.
Now, there may be a few sore heads in Brora this morning after the town's football team caused one of the biggest shocks in Scottish Cup history. The part-timers, who haven't played a game since February, beat Hearts 2-1 last night, causing these celebrations. Hearts having reached the final for the past 2 seasons, whilst Brora had only trained 5 times in the lead-up to the match, but they're into the 3rd round. What an upset it was. Manchester City's women will be hoping to take a step towards the Champions League semi-finals this morning. They play Barcelona in the first leg of their quarter-final, but they'll do so without their captain, Steph Houghton. She's been ruled out with an Achilles injury. The match kicks off at 11:30. Now, to a potential breakthrough in dealing with head trauma in sport. Pitch-side saliva tests for concussion have moved a step closer after a successful trial in rugby union players. It comes after rugby's governing bodies face a lawsuit from retired players suffering with early onset dementia. The tests are currently being carried out in a lab. It will be at least 2 years before the pitch-side version is made available.
I've been working on concussion and concussion diagnostics for over 2 decades. And actually, there hasn't been really a breakthrough like this, something that is, sort of quick and accurate and that's actually measurable almost from the point of injury. The fact is it's non-invasive and objective and accurate at the same time. It's really quite a breakthrough for, at least for kind of this field of work.
Back on the grid and perhaps with a point to prove, former Formula One world champion Fernando Alonso believes he's better than many of the younger drivers on the grid as he prepares to return to the sport with Alpine this season. Although he accepts world champion Lewis Hamilton will take some stopping, he's been speaking to Ben Croucher.
I think we have a very competitive grid and it's going to be a challenge, to meet everyone on track.
Do you think you're still as good as them?
No, I'm better.
You genuinely believe that?
Yes.
Well, the season is about to start. I guess you need to be confident, don't you? So Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton in his sights. Hamilton and Tom Brady, though, are two athletes at the top of their game. Hamilton has won 7 Formula One World Championships, while Brady has won the Super Bowl 7 times. But could the pair swap sports? Well, in a conversation with James Corden, Brady seemed up for it. Hamilton, less so. Have a listen to this.
I got the most beautiful gift. And you know what I realized? It doesn't fit. How can I be a driver when the helmets don't fit me? I'm going to send him one of mine and I'm going to see how he likes it. But I think we could get Lewis in there for a few plays. I think I've seen his athletic ability. He's pretty talented in a lot of areas. I think he could do some things on the football field.
I would run the opposite way.
I know Lewis Hamilton has a lot of interest outside Formula One. I think his team would draw a line at him giving NFL or including NFL on that list. That, Victoria, is all from now. It's back to you.
Thank you very much. The Home Office says it's going to overhaul the asylum system in the UK. It says for the first time, the way people travel to the UK will have a direct bearing on whether they will be granted asylum in an effort to reduce people smugglers operating in the English Channel. An asylum seeker is someone who's left their own country in order to seek protection from persecution. They haven't yet been legally recognised as a refugee and are waiting to receive a decision on their asylum claim. Let's talk to Enver Solomon, who is the Chief Executive of the charity Refugee Council, and also to Mary Enja Oj. She came to the UK in 2017 from Kenya, where she and her family faced persecution, and she's still waiting for the outcome of her asylum claim. Welcome both of you. Thank you for talking to us. Enver Solomon, we're all well aware of what an illegal route is, getting in a dinghy to cross the Channel, for example. Can you tell us what the legal, legitimate routes are?
Well, that actually is a legitimate route, Victoria. Under the UN Convention, which we signed up to 7 decades ago, just after the Second World War in 1951, anybody can choose which country they seek to find sanctuary and to make an application for asylum in. So in the way that many people have come to this country overland, fleeing wars and terror in Afghanistan or in the former Yugoslavia when there was the war and terror there, people have come overland, put their lives at risk and have got here and have had their case heard fairly and justly on British soil. And we must absolutely continue to do that because many of those people have come into our country and made incredible contributions. Even today in the fight against the pandemic, in the fight against COVID, we have doctors who came here as refugees who risked their life and limb and travelled overland to come to the UK. And today they are keeping us safe in the fight against the pandemic. It's important to remember that.
Well, the Home Secretary is creating a differentiation between people who come on official government refugee schemes. She says that is fair, and if they come that way, then they will most likely be given leave to remain in the UK indefinitely. Do you welcome that?
Well, I applaud the government when it says that it wants to provide safe and legal routes to those who are displaced by war and terror. We've welcomed 20,000 people affected by the horrendous civil war in Syria in the last 5 years. And we should absolutely continue to do that, but we should do it in a much more ambitious scale. Those 20,000 are the equivalent of just 7 people in each parliamentary constituency every year. We can take in many more that are displaced by war through safe routes, so-called safe routes from refugee camps. But at the same time, we absolutely must not slam the door in the face of those who are unable to come through those routes but have to risk life and limb to get here, because many of those people actually have a legitimate claim for protection, and we must give them a fair hearing on British soil and ensure that quick decisions, good quality decisions are made. And if they do have a claim for protection, they are welcomed into our country. And if they don't, of course, they should then be returned to their country swiftly and with support.
Mary, I know you, your mum, your sister and daughter came to the UK on a plane from Kenya back in 2017. You came on visitors' visas. Once here, you claimed asylum because you had faced persecution back home. I wonder if you think it's fair to treat asylum seekers who come here on a boat, having paid smugglers, more harshly.
Well, thank you so much, Victoria, for having me this morning. I think it's really very unfair that the Home Office wants to put in place this kind of system that chooses to divide asylum seekers, that those who come through what they're calling legal, for example, through the UN, that those are the legal asylum seekers. That's a very unfair way of treating people, because nobody chooses persecution. And if you arrive here through a boat, you should be given a fair chance to access the asylum system and have your case treated fairly as a person who came through the resettlement system.
Can I ask why you came to the UK as opposed to another European country?
Well, I was able to get a straight visiting visa to the UK, and that's why I arrived directly to the UK. I did not go through like any other country, which they would call a safe country.
Understood. And how has life been for you in Bury, in your house in Bury with your family, as you wait for your asylum claim to be processed?
Well, it's been very tough. It's been very challenging, especially with the kind of support that we receive from the Home Office is very little, especially the money they give us, which is £39 a week. It leaves us at a point where we have to make tough decisions every day, or you have to decide, is it your food? Is it clothing? There's no entertainment. That you're not allowed to have a TV in your house. That means you're not able to be updated with the news. And especially with this pandemic, the pandemic definitely, it doesn't choose according to your immigration status. It has really affected most of everyone in the same way. So for us, it's been very tough and very challenging. And having to live on low support money from the Home Office, it has really subjected us into mental health issues and also to very low levels of poverty.
I knew that you would receive around £39 each to live on. I knew that you aren't able to work while your claim is being processed. And I know that your sister can't go to college, again, because your asylum status hasn't been settled. I didn't know that you weren't allowed a television. Is that right?
Yes, in the asylum accommodation, you're not allowed to bring in a television. So
why?
There's no entertainment at all. And you can imagine you're not allowed to work. So you have to stay locked in your house all day. Because, for example, if you don't have enough money to afford data, then you're not able to connect with the community, which also leads us to have more and more mental health issues.
Okay. Do you know why you're not? Sorry, I know this will seem a minor point, but do you know why you're not allowed to bring a television into that accommodation?
Well, that's the rules they put on a booklet they give you once you enter the asylum accommodation.
Enver Solomon, do we have a crisis of asylum seekers in this country?
But it's pretty appalling, isn't it, Victoria, when someone like Mary, who we've heard from, can't access a television. And indeed, in that accommodation that Mary's talking about, we know through our work that many people can't even access the internet because they're not allowed to have an internet connection. I mean, that's a denial of their fundamental right to be connected to the world when they've done nothing wrong. And it's almost treating them as though they're guilty before they've had the opportunity to have their case assessed. It seems
on the other hand, Mr. Solomon, sorry to interrupt, on the other hand, they are being given a house to live in and it is safe.
It is safe, but we need to treat people with humanity and compassion. You know, when people fled Nazi Germany, and there's many people who are probably watching this program who will have relatives going back through their family histories who fled Nazi Germany. When they came here, we welcomed them and we treated them humanely as equivalent citizens and as equivalent human beings. And we supported them and gave them the support that they required. It's no difference today if you're fleeing war or persecution from another country around the globe. We need to treat them with humanity and compassion. We need to give them a fair hearing, and we need to allow them to have their case heard so they get protection if they need protection.
Okay.
It's absolutely the least we can do in showing that this country has a sense of humanity and a sense of compassion and a sense of common ownership with those who have to experience war and terror around the globe.
Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you. Enver Solomon, who's the Chief Executive of the Refugee Council, and Mary Enja Oj, asylum seeker. Thank you very much for talking to us this morning. Thank you. There are reports, or there is one report, that children in Britain will start receiving a COVID-19 vaccine as early as August. It's according to the Daily Telegraph newspaper this morning. A spokesman for the Department of Health said while clinical trials are underway to test the efficacy and safety of COVID-19 vaccines in children and young adults, these trials have not concluded yet. We'll be guided by the advice of our experts, including the independent JCVI, that's the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. So let's talk to Professor Adam Finn, who is Professor of Paediatrics at the University of Bristol. He's on that committee. I did ask you a few weeks ago if under 18s, or when under 18s, would be vaccinated. You said it wasn't a given. What's the situation now, Professor Finn?
Very much the same situation as it was then. It may turn out to be necessary to immunise children, but we haven't got to the point of making any decisions on that. And the spokesperson you quoted is correct that the studies that will show us that the reactogenicity and immunogenicity of the vaccines in children are acceptable are still underway. So I think it's premature to conclude that there will be a programme for children, let alone that will start in August. And the way that particular piece was written in the Telegraph seems to have suggested that I was the person that told them that, and I certainly wasn't.
OK. Thank you for clearing that up. We are giving about 3 million doses of the vaccine every week. So far, we are speeding through. Obviously, there's this 4-week delay of supplies from India, which could slow things down a little bit. But we're more than on track, aren't we?
Yes, I think things are going forward well. I mean, clearly, we would preferred not to have had this slightly disturbing information about limited supply, but in fact, I think we were expecting that to happen at some point or other along the way. And certainly every other aspect of the programme is going forward really well. We're interested now to see what kind of coverage rates we get as we move down through the age groups. We're still in phase 1 at the moment, down to the age of 50, and people are coming forward in very large numbers to be immunised, which is very reassuring.
In Israel, I understand that they are vaccinating 16 and 17-year-olds at the moment. Are they looking at what kind of studies are they looking at?
Well, in fact, the phase 3 data on the Pfizer vaccine, which is the one that's being used in Israel, did include a reasonable number of teenagers in 16, 17 age bracket. So that the data to support using the vaccine in that age group already exists. And so that may have contributed to their decision to go forward in those older teenagers. We're currently assembling the evidence for the other vaccines. And I think if routine immunization of children does go forward at some point, then it would be logical to start with older teenagers and work down just in the same way as we have done through the adult population, because there's clearly more transmission amongst teenagers than there is amongst younger children.
Sure. And so if we do go forward with that and we do vaccinate teenagers and perhaps younger, what will that mean for COVID in this country?
Well, I think the likely driver of any such policy would be will be based on what we find, how well we find the vaccines interrupt transmission within the population. So the program up till now has been very much focused on trying to stop people dying or getting very sick with COVID. In other words, individual direct protection of the people who get the vaccine. But as we move down through the population, the rates of serious illness are much lower in the younger age groups, and it becomes much more about trying to reduce the circulation of the virus in the same way that we're trying to do that currently with lockdowns and social distancing and so on. When you get down to children, there's very few serious illnesses in children. And so it really becomes almost entirely about trying to reduce spread. And if it proves necessary to immunize children as well in order to achieve that, that would be the main argument for doing it. And that, of course, would help keep schools open, which is very important for the benefit of children.
And parents. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you, Professor Adam Finn from the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. 12 months ago today, the Olympics were cancelled or postponed. It meant competitors like two-time Taekwondo gold medalist Jade Jones had to stay focused to keep at the top of her game. She is now starting the final preparations for the European Championships at the beginning of April, before turning her full attention to the delayed Tokyo Games in July. So how do you train for gold in a pandemic? Let's talk to Jade Jones now. Hello, Jade Jones. How are you?
Hi, you okay? Thanks for having me.
No worries. So how is the preparation for the Europeans going?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, it's been a lot different to what I'm used to. Obviously, there's been times where I've had to train from a garage and doing all sorts of kind of different training. But, you know, I'm looking forward to it now. It's 3 weeks to go, so it'll be good to see where I'm truly at ahead of the Olympic Games.
And how do you train? Because, I mean, are you allowed to break social distancing or what?
Yeah, to be fair, we've been very lucky. Our national academy has kind of been pretty much normal now. You know, we're still managing to train, and we've currently got like a Cuban training camp on at the minute. So for the first time in ages, we've got some like opponents and training partners. So yeah, you know, we've been very lucky, but there has been times where we've had to like social distance and obviously train from home as well.
Right. What other aspects of your life have you had to put on hold because of restrictions and because of the pandemic?
You know, I think it's been hard for everyone, and you know, the St. James's research shows that everyone has kind of continued their plans still, even in this pandemic. So it's crazy and, you know, overwhelming really to see that people are still doing their plans. And, you know, like me, even though the Olympics has been postponed, you know, I'm still like cracking on, and I'm still trying to get that gold medal. And I think the worst part about it has just been, you know, not seeing my family and friends, and yeah, basically not being able to see them as much. That's what's been the hard bit.
Yeah. And of course, they won't be able to come to Tokyo to watch you because overseas spectators aren't allowed now. Will that make a difference to you or not?
Yeah, you know, it was kind of heartbreaking, you know, to hear that they're not going to be able to come. They've literally been to the Youth Olympics where it first started, and then they've been to every Olympic. So it was really hard for me and my family to take. But I'm kind of trying to see it now as, you know, like imagine bringing that gold home to them, and just the thought of, you know, bringing it home, and hopefully it'll help the country, and the Olympics can kind of be the light at the end of the tunnel for everybody.
That would be amazing. And imagine if you do get gold again and you come back, there's going to be a massive party for you when you get home, isn't there?
Definitely.
Jade, can you give us some advice? I mean, there's plenty of people of all ages who have found it hard to keep motivated in the last few months, particularly in this last lockdown. It has felt harder than the previous two, certainly for me anyway. How, with your, you know, your sort of mental resilience, your physical resilience, how do you keep motivated? What advice can you give us?
You know, it is hard, and like you said, it's almost got harder now because it's been so long and we've been through it so much now. It's kind of, everyone's kind of sick of it, but you know, just keep positive and keep motivated. I know it's hard, but the world is going to open back up, and it is going to go back to normal, even though it's hard to imagine. So you've kind of got to be ready, and you can't put your plans and your goals and your dreams on hold, because it's going to open back up and you're kind of going to be behind everyone else. So, you know, keep finding ways to adapt and get around it, and kind of see this time as, you know, how can you make yourself a better person, or how can you achieve something? You know, there's lots of things that you can be improving or can be better in yourself in some way. Just trying to find them things, really.
Yeah. You turned 28, I think, at the weekend, didn't you? Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Does that mean that the Tokyo Games may be your last Olympics?
It's a hard one, to be fair. I think now, especially like the next Olympics is going to be even closer. You know, it does make me think, oh, should I do a fourth? And, you know, I'm a kind of person that, you know, if I get the gold medal, it probably would entice you to think, oh, imagine trying to get 4 Olympic golds. But, you know, I'll probably just get to this one first, because the Olympic cycles are hard and it's a long 4 years. And this time, you know, it's been 5 years, but it's definitely not off the cards, I'll say that.
Okay. Well, listen, good luck. Continued success with the training. Good luck in the Europeans and obviously with the Olympics. Thank you very much, Jade.
No, thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks for talking to us. Jade Jones. Trying to control the spread of coronavirus is a continuous global effort, as you know, and part of that effort is trying to crack the virus's genetic code. A research lab in Cambridge is analysing the DNA of thousands of different virus samples, helping to identify new COVID mutations before they spread. Here's our science correspondent, Richard Westcott.
This is one of the most important rooms in the country for finding potentially dangerous new variants of COVID. If you've tested positive, there's a chance a little bit of your virus ended up in one of these machines, having its genetic fingerprint taken. They read all the DNA of each individual virus, known as its genome.
The virus genome is much smaller than the human genome, maybe about 100,000 times smaller. And every one of these machines is able to look at 1,500 samples every 24 hours. There are 20 of these machines and they are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Starting from scratch a year ago, they've set up by far the biggest genome monitoring system in the world, going from 90 COVID test samples in week 1 to 20,000 a week today, from all over the UK.
You've been doing this for a year. You were one of the key people who set it all up in the first place. What was it like back then?
It was absolutely crazy. It was all very new to us and how we could do it. And also the pressure and the importance of it certainly weighed on our shoulders.
This is how they spotted the more infectious Kent variant that swept Britain.
Why is speed so important to this process?
The sooner that we've identified that positive case was actually a variant of concern, the sooner that action can be taken to further identify that individual's contacts, test them, surge testing, and make sure that hasn't got the opportunity to spread further.
There are thousands of different types of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, all with slightly different genomes or genetic fingerprints. If 2 people have different types, they didn't catch it from each other.
And that's really critical information, because that allows you to it allows you to understand potentially how the virus is transmitting in a location. So it might be within an outbreak in a workplace. If everyone's got the same virus, then the chances are that's happening inside the workplace. But if it's all different viruses, then it's likely it's happening in the community. So that allows you to make decisions about how you would manage an outbreak.
So this is like the world's biggest reconnaissance system, keeping tabs on how the enemy is changing and moving around. Critical information if you want to stamp out future waves before they take hold. Richard Westcott, BBC News, at the Wellcome Sanger Institute in Cambridge.
Richard Westcott reporting. Thank you to those who have offered to donate a television to Mary in her house in Bury as she awaits her asylum claim to be processed. You're really, really, really generous, but she's not allowed to have a TV. It's part of the rules of the accommodation that she's in. But thank you very much anyway. On the situation of holidays abroad, Carol emails to say let's stay in the UK for our holidays and save lives, boost our economy and help unemployed people by opening up jobs in the hospitality industry. Right, let's bring you a look at the weather now. Here's Carol.
Hello again. Over the next few days, the forecast is essentially sunshine and showers, but turning much colder on Friday, so some of those showers, mostly in the hills, will be wintry. Today we've got a band of cloud and light patchy rain pushing down towards the southeast, showers across Northern Ireland and also Scotland turning heavier through the course of the day with the wind strengthening, but in between there will be a fair bit of sunshine with top temperatures 13 degrees. We say goodbye to this cloud in the southeast overnight, but we do have showers coming in across England and Wales, pushing south, and then more showers coming in across Scotland and Northern Ireland. And it's going to be a cold night, particularly in rural areas where temperatures will be lower than this, and indeed there could well be some pockets of frost to watch out for. So tomorrow we say goodbye to our front pushing away to the southeast, taking its cloud, spots of rain with it, and then it really is a mixture of sunshine and showers, with most of the showers being in the north and the west. In the sunshine, temperatures up to about 13 degrees and lighter winds.